Welcome everyone, this is Jason Pagan with the Secure Project. I am going to endeavor to jump into a topic today that I think is, it hits close to home, and I think it does for every man. Obviously for women as well, but this is a version for men only. That doesn't mean you ladies can't watch it, but definitely it is for the men. I'm calling this intimacy turnaround. Um, because it is an experience that I have had to experience in my own relationship and in my own life. Now, uh, I want to talk specifically to men because I think a lot of men are starving for intimacy in their marriages, but don't really even understand what intimacy is due to the grid that was laid foundationally, even in their own childhood. And we find this so often. I know I find it every day in my coaching business. I find this constantly. Wives are starving for intimacy, and the men are starving for intimacy, but they actually don't even know what it is. The fact is that each person can define intimacy in a different way. So you can be starving for intimacy while sleeping in the same bed together, because those they don't mean the same thing when they're using the word intimacy. So when I ask men, when was the last time you and your wife were intimate? Immediately, almost immediately, almost all the time, their mind goes to one thing, and that's sex. Okay? When were you intimate? Translation, when did you last have sex? Do you know what intimacy actually means? It's very interesting. The word intimacy comes from the Latin word intimus. It means innermost. Intimacy is about allowing another person access to your inner world and being willing to enter their inner world. It means innermost. Okay? That means that you have to be able to be vulnerable and open and expose the good and the bad and the ugly. So really the bottom line is the starting place is never sex. Sex is one expression of intimacy. And that's why sex alone cannot define intimacy. I can have access to someone's body without ever having access to their heart. I can know what my wife looks like naked and still not know what she's afraid of. Okay, I can know how to touch her body and have no idea how to touch her grief. Okay, I can know what brings her pleasure and not know what makes her feel understood and seen and heard. So sexual intimacy is powerful precisely and only because the body is supposed to be one more expression of something much deeper that takes place before the sexual intimacy. So it's like, you know me, I know you, you see me, I see you, and now I am giving you access to another deeply vulnerable part of myself. So what if sex is not the definition of intimacy? What if sex is just one expression of intimacy? And even though we might know that, like up here cognitively, how are we experiencing that inside of our relationships? What if some of us have been trying to get to the seventh floor? Sexual intimacy is the seventh floor. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sexual intimacy is the seventh floor, but you're leaving your wife standing alone on floors 1 through 6. That's what I want to talk about, okay? Because we have to expand our emotional capacity for we have to expand our sphere or grid of intimacy. So before we can go any further right now, I want to give one important disclaimer, okay? If your wife is dismissive avoidant, or you strongly believe she has an avoidant attachment pattern, I want you to still watch this video. Don't check out. But I also, because what I'm about to teach you is very foundational, but please do not take everything I'm teaching here and immediately go home and apply it harder, okay, to an avoidant wife. I've made a second video, and you will find it on my YouTube, a second video specifically for you called Intimacy Turnaround, the Avoidant Edition. Because with an avoidant wife, the principles are the same, but the approach can be radically different, probably more than you realize. And what feels like loving pursuit to you can feel like pressure and obligation and duty to her. What feels like curiosity to you can feel like intrusion to her. What feels like emotional connection to you can feel like being analyzed to her. And if you don't understand that distinction, you're going to actually take good intimacy tools that you're learning here and accidentally create more distance. So watch this video first, learn the 7 floors, understand the foundation, and then go watch Intimacy Turnaround, the Avoidant Edition, because I'm going to show you how to approach these same floors when closeness itself can sometimes activate your wife's defenses. So it's the same house, the same 7 floors, just a very different way of approaching the door. Now, let me show you what I mean by intimacy. First off, we all develop a grid for intimacy, okay? We get our examples for intimacy. We get our understanding about intimacy. We get our view of intimacy, our definition of intimacy. We get equipped in intimacy. We get modeled intimacy. Every one of us grows up developing a grid for what closeness means. Nobody sits a 7-year-old boy down, okay, takes a whiteboard and says, today we're going to establish your theology and psychology of intimacy. That's not happening. You just experience relationships. That's how you learn intimacy. And your nervous system is taking notes the whole time. How did people respond to you when you were afraid? What happened when you cried? Could you talk about your feelings? Did dad and mom ask about your inner world, how you're experiencing life? Did you feel safe bringing things up? Did mom listen? Was affection normal? Did your parents hug you? Did dad tell you he loved you? Could you make mistakes without losing connection? Did people repair after conflict? Could someone disagree with you and still remain emotionally close? Did anyone delight in you? Okay, were you known? Were you understood? Were you cherished? Were you comforted? Were you touched affectionately without something being required from you? All of those experiences begin forming your grid for intimacy. And so you walk out of childhood with layers and layers and innumerable thousands of moments of experience, and that's what teaches you what intimacy looks like. So one boy learns closeness means being known. Another one means closeness means performing. So when I do really good, then I earn closeness. Another one can learn that people are interested in what's happening inside of me, but another one is learning nobody really wants to hear that stuff anyway. Okay, one learns how to be invisible and disappear and just deal with everything on the inside. One learns how to be tender and strong at the same time. But another one over here, he doesn't talk about his feelings. He fixes the problem and moves on. One might learn that physical affection can be safe and warm and non-sexual. And then you have all the traumas that enter into these things as well. So you can have another boy that barely experiences affectionate touch at all. And then there's another way a lot of boys learn about intimacy, and that's sexual imagery or pornography. And this is where kind of part of my own story enters into this conversation. And I think it's important for us to understand that grid can get distorted. I know that mine did. I did not grow up experiencing very much intimacy with my parents. My father was very absent. He had a childhood that resulted in the way he was, and my mother was trying to navigate an incredibly chaotic and emotional world with her own self, and then with my 6 older siblings. I was the last of the Paganites. And I don't say that to blame either of them. I'm explaining the environment in which my grid and model of intimacy developed. There were forms of relational intimacy that I just never had much experience receiving. We're going to talk about there's 7 floors of intimacy. 6 of them I just really never experienced. And so I didn't learn how to get them from God. I didn't learn how to give them to myself. I did not know how to give them inside of relationships. These are forms of relational intimacy I didn't have much experience receiving as a young boy. And then around 7 years old, I was introduced to pornography for the first time, and something happened. I encountered a feeling and imagery connected to something that's supposed to exist within relational closeness, covenant, vulnerability, mutual giving. But I encountered the sexual dimension without the relational architecture that was meant to be underneath of it. And one magazine led to another, and then to another, and then to another. Then eventually there were videos, and my developing mind was repeatedly. Remember, repetition is what builds these definitions and this imagery and the synapses and the the neuro processes in your brain, and mine was repeatedly exposed to displays that looked like ultimate closeness. I saw that as ultimate closeness. Bodies and desire and being wanted and being chosen and sexual attention and the good feelings that came with that. And slowly, without even consciously deciding it, obviously, my definition of intimacy became increasingly sexual. So for me, sex became intimacy. And now, as I coach men every single day, I encounter versions of this story on a constant basis. Not my exact story, right? But the same grid, the word intimacy. When you say that word to many, many men, the first association is sex. But even that isn't the deepest problem, because underneath sex can be something much bigger, okay? Sex starts to carry things it was never designed to carry. Now, I want you to hear me closely when I say this. For boys who grew up without enough relational intimacy, they never learned that they were wanted and accepted and valuable or masculine, or they were enough or desirable or chosen. And what happens is, when this intimacy equals sex on their relational grid and grid for intimacy, what happens is sexual acceptance eventually becomes attached to questions that are much deeper than sexual desire or sexual expression. So it's like they have to, the sex is what says to them, am I wanted? Am I accepted? Am I valuable? Am I enough? Am I masculine? Am I desirable? Am I chosen? Do I matter? And suddenly sex isn't merely sex anymore. It has become evidence. If she wants me sexually, I'm wanted. If she wants me sexually, then I've not been rejected. If she desires me, then I'm masculine. If she initiates, then I'm chosen. If she responds enthusiastically, then I'm enough. If we're having sex, then our marriage must be okay. But here's the other side to that. If she doesn't want it tonight, then the man's body doesn't just experience my wife doesn't want sex. It can experience I'm unwanted, I'm rejected, I'm not enough. She doesn't desire me. Something's wrong with us. Something's wrong with me. I mean, it just can spiral out of control. Identity and value and worth are being found in that expression inside the relationship. That's an enormous amount of emotional weight to put on the functionality of sex, and an enormous amount of emotional weight to put on a wife, because now she isn't simply being invited into an encounter of intimacy. She may unknowingly be carrying responsibility for regulating her husband's identity through the very act of sex. So because he didn't have a relational grid of all these other 6 floors that we're going to talk about, he funnels all of his value and worth, acceptance, being chosen and wanted, into the arena of sex. And she can feel that pressure even when he never says those words, right? So here's the pattern I want you to pick up on. You get this relational grid when you're a child, this grid of intimacy, this understanding, this modeling of what intimacy is. Well, then we fall in love. Now, something fascinating happens when a man meets a woman. He's captivated, right? He's interested. He's curious. He wants to know everything. Like, he wants to know, what's your favorite food? What music do you like? What happened when you were 10? Tell me about your family. What's your dreams? What scares you? What makes you laugh? What hurts you? Tell me about your day. Curiosity comes alive, and he'll stay with you on the phone until 2 o'clock in the morning, listening to details that 10 years later, he wonders, even why in the world am I even listening to this? Okay? Well, what happened? Well, part of what happens in an early romantic attraction involves a very powerful biological system associated with reward and motivation and bonding and attention and arousal. And we can kind of name it like this. I call it being drugged by God. When you meet someone and that chemistry happens, you start releasing unheard of levels of dopamine and norepinephrine and oxytocin and vasopressin and so I think they call it I think it's serotonergic. I forget how to explain the word, but all those systems are involved as well. So novelty is high, and anticipation is high, and reward is high. Really, you're high. You're high on all these chemicals, this hormone cocktail that you has been introduced into your system, and attention toward this person that you're in love with almost feels virtually effortless. Okay? So look at what the man does frequently inside a new relationship. He pays attention. He's curious. He asks questions. He remembers details. He pursues. He purchases. He empathizes. He's patient. He reassures. He expresses affection. He wants to understand her. He wants to cherish and hold. And he kisses her without every kiss necessarily becoming intercourse. He's climbing these floors. Floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, floor 4, floor 5, floor 6. Okay, he's knowing her, he's understanding, he's validating, he's empathetic, he's cherishing, he's exchanging physical interaction without it leading to sexuality. And eventually what happens is they marry. Now the marriage is consummated and sexual intimacy happens at floor 7. And neither the woman nor the man realize what just happened. Sex was not standing by itself. That's the 7th floor. Okay? She wasn't simply sexually pursued. She had been known. She had been understood. She had been validated. She had been empathized with. She had been cherished. She had been held. And then she was sexually known. Sexual intimacy was an outflow of an intimate relationship in these 6 other areas. Okay? That's what happens. Well, but the honeymoon doesn't last forever. And the intense novelty of that early romance changes because life gets normal. Now enter jobs, bills, kids, laundry, stress, mortgages, schedules, exhaustion, disagreements, conflicts, and the powerful motivational environment of all of those chemicals that once made intense focus on each other feel almost effortless doesn't remain identical forever. It begins to wane, and now something gets exposed. Your original intimacy grid now gets exposed. So what happens when curiosity isn't effortless anymore? What happens when listening actually becomes a skill instead of infatuated impulse? What happens when empathy actually requires you to be intentional? What happens when cherishing requires maturity? What happens when affection doesn't automatically have the electricity it had during that dating phase? What happens when you're knowing that another person actually requires you to slow down when you'd rather solve the problem? We tend to fall back toward what we practiced, and we tend to fall back to what we learned. And for some men, these lower 6 floors begin disappearing while the desire for the 7th floor remains. So he stops asking questions, knowing. He stops listening deeply, understanding. He stops understanding why she needs to tell him all these details. Validation becomes, well, why didn't you just do this or do that? You get irritated, annoyed. Empathy, instead of I'm with you in this, you problem solve. Instead of listening to her feelings, you try to fix stuff to make the feelings go away. Cherishing becomes only occasional. Affection starts carrying expectation. You can't have physical vulnerability unless it's going to lead to sex. So a kiss means maybe. A cuddle means maybe. A back rub means maybe. Going to bed early means maybe. Maybe what? Maybe sex. Maybe sex. So touch seems to always have a destination. And meanwhile, the fact is you're confused because you think, why aren't we intimate anymore? Because you're thinking intimacy is sex. But that's exactly what she's been wondering. Because she has seen intimacy as knowing, understanding, validation, empathy, cherishing, physical vulnerability. which opens the door for the sexual intimacy. So what the chemicals and the hormones cause you to do by default and connection, when they wane, you're left to your own skills, emotional intelligence, relationship understanding, relational IQ, within these 6 floors. And if you don't learn to use skills and to get into her world on these first 6 floors, then you're demanding the 7th floor. And there's nothing worse than a woman who doesn't feel seen and known and heard and loved and cherished and delighted in being demanded to have sexual intimacy when really it's just sex, because the intimacy has not grown in and day out. So you're using the same word for 2 completely different experiences. So here's my challenge to men. I'm not asking you to become less sexual. I'm not telling you sexual desire is even bad. That's not at all. I'm telling you sex doesn't, or let me say it this way. I'm not telling you sex doesn't matter in marriage, and I'm not asking you to become ashamed of wanting your wife. Quite the opposite, in fact. I want to expand your capacity for intimacy so sex doesn't have to carry all of it. I want to give you 7 floors, and I want you to ask yourself, which floors have I stopped visiting? Okay, let's go to floor number 1. Floor number 1 is knowing. Okay, I know what's happening inside of you. So your wife calls you, you're at work, and she starts saying the kids did this, the dog did this happened at Walmart, then my mom called and somebody said this, and you're thinking, where is this story going? I got a job to do. What's the point? What am I supposed to do with this information? Well, listen, brother, sometimes that information isn't the point. Being known is the point. She's opening a door into her world, innermost being. Innermost, that is intimacy. That's what it is. She's giving you a bid for connection. That's what she's looking for, okay? She's opening a door into her world. It's just like the bride of Christ does with him. We start telling him about our day. We're talking to him about what's going on in our lives. We're saying all these things. Well, what if he was just like, what's the point? I don't care. No, he stays present with us. He meets us as his bride. He interacts with us because being known is the point. She's opening a door into her world. Come see what today felt like from inside of me. So you don't have to find the moral of the story. She's not looking for a solution. You can simply become interested, okay? Knowing says your internal world matters enough for me to learn it. That is intimacy, okay? Understanding. What was that like for you? Understanding discovers experience. So what part bothered you the most? That's a good, curious question. What did you feel when she said that? Was that more frustrating or hurtful? Well, now you're not just merely hearing what happened. You're learning her experience of what happened. And gentlemen, your wife can experience something completely different or differently than you would have experienced. You don't have to agree with her interpretation to understand it. You don't have to correct her interpretation. It's just saying, help me see this through your eyes. That is intimacy. That's what it is. Okay? When you look at validation, so many of us we stop here. Okay? A lot of times we stop at validation because we feel like if we validate her feelings or her emotions, then we're agreeing with her. Listen, validation is just saying, given what you've experienced or what you're dealing with, that makes sense. Your response makes sense to me. I could see why you could say that. That sounds exhausting. That's validation. Well, I'm exhausted. Well, I wouldn't be exhausted if I was in that situation, but she is. Well, I could see why you would be exhausted. If I were you, I would probably be exhausted too. That's validation. I can understand why that frustrated you. After the day you've had, I can see why that hit you so hard. That's validation. I understand why you were disappointed. So validation does not mean that you are objectively correct about everything. It just means I can see how you got there. I can see how you arrived at feeling that way or thinking that. So you're not standing across the courtroom arguing your case. You're stepping onto her side long enough to understand her perspective, even if you don't agree with it. That is intimacy, okay? Then you can take it even deeper to empathy. Someone said, I was doing a coaching session this morning, and someone said, well, empathy is putting yourself in their shoes. Yes, absolutely. I'm with you in it. That's what empathy says. So that must have felt lonely. Man, I feel for you. I hate that you're carrying that. Or I can hear how overwhelmed you are. Sometimes it's like, man, babe, that's rough. Like, you don't need a counseling degree, guys. You need presence. That's it. You're meeting her where she's at. You don't have to experience this moment alone. That is intimacy. You don't have to experience this moment alone. I'm with you in it. That is intimacy. Okay? Look at floor 5. This is cherishing. Cherishing simply means that I matter to you. Okay? I don't merely make sense to you, but I actually matter to you. So she's experiencing that she matters. Cherishing is delight. It's kindness. It's affection. It's service. It's compliments and thoughtfulness and playfulness and attention. Looking across the room and smiling at her. Bringing her something because you thought of her. Noticing something that she's carrying. Telling her she's beautiful when you're not trying to initiate sex. Thanking her, admiring her, enjoying her. Cherishing is just communicating this idea that I don't just love having a wife. I love you. You. And I cherish you. Like, you matter. The good, the bad, and the ugly. That, brothers, is intimacy. Okay? Now, the physical vulnerability is floor 6. And this is when we enter physical closeness. So it's holding hands and sitting close and hugging and cuddling and kissing and her head against your chest and touching her hair, a back rub and lying together. And here's a revolutionary concept for some of us. It doesn't always have to go anywhere. Okay, you can rub your wife's back for 15 minutes. You can kiss her forehead and you can say, good night, babe, I love you, and go to sleep. Because that wasn't failed foreplay. That was successful intimacy. These things in themselves are intimacy. They are acts of coming close. It's physical closeness does not automatically create an obligation. You want to make sure you're building that, because if every time you touch your wife, it's supposed to lead to sex, well, that's going to create an enormous amount of pressure in your marriage. You can't teach your nervous system that you don't want to teach your nervous system that physical closeness automatically is an obligation for sexuality or sexual intimacy. Okay? Well, so once you have knowing and understanding and validation and empathy and cherishing and physical vulnerability, this intimacy is growing in the relationship. That 7th floor is going to take care of itself. You arrive there. Sex belongs here. It belongs on the 7th floor. It's the 7th floor. It's not dirty. It's something. It's not something we're trying to remove from marriage. It belongs here. It's part of this. It isn't something you need to apologize for possessing. Sex can be playful and passionate and vulnerable and connecting and mutual and powerful and beautiful. But I want you to hear me right now. Sexual intimacy was never supposed to carry the entire weight of intimacy. It's one of intimacy's deepest physical expressions. And some of us have spent years trying to enter the house through the 7th floor. That's what we've done. We've spent years trying to get into the house through the 7th floor. So, do I have to do all 6 things every time I want to have sex? No. And if that's what you heard, then I think you've missed my message. This is not listen for 10 minutes, ask 2 questions. Okay, I want to have sex tonight, so let's see. I want to listen, I want to validate her. I want to empathize. I'm going to give her a compliment. I'm going to cuddle. Sex unlocked. No, your wife is not a vending machine, okay? And intimacy is not currency. You don't put 6 quarters into the machine and receive sex. The moment these floors become techniques for obtaining that, now you have a covert contract. You have an agenda. Listen, you're just going to rebuild the same problem using nicer language. This is not a checklist. Not a checklist. Okay? This is not a vending machine. No, this is a way of relating. This is called relationship. The goal isn't how do I get my wife onto the 7th floor. Okay? The goal is how do I become a man capable of living throughout the entire house. That's the intimacy turnaround. Okay? And paradoxically, if every affectionate interaction secretly carries the question, is this going to lead to sex? Your wife may begin protecting herself from affection. Why? She might want to give you affection that's just physical vulnerability, but she holds back because affection has become expensive. Every time she gives you affection, you just want sex. She may not want to engage you in validation because every time she wants you to understand or know her, you make it lead to sex. So your wife will begin protecting herself from affection because affection has become expensive. A hug is not just a hug, in other words, okay? Or a kiss is not just a kiss. Going upstairs isn't just going upstairs. A massage isn't just care. If every interaction potentially opens a negotiation that she didn't agree to enter, so she may avoid floor 6 because she doesn't want the pressure of floor 7. And then you experience less touch, which makes you feel more rejected, which makes you pursue harder, which makes her feel more pressure, which makes her avoid physical affection more, and around we go. And here's the irony of this all. When you make every form of intimacy, okay, when you make every form of intimacy responsible for producing sex, you actually make sexual intimacy harder. And it's not because you failed to perform the right technique. It's because safety and freedom matter inside of desire. Now, some men would say, so her emotional needs matter, but my sexual needs don't? That's not what I'm saying, okay? Listen, your sexuality matters too. Your longing to be desired matters. Your disappointment matters. Your desire for mutual sexual connection in your marriage matters. You should be able to communicate all of those things. But here's a difference between expressing a desire and making another human responsible for your identity. I really desire you is very, very different from if you don't desire me tonight, I'm not okay. Okay? I miss our sexual connection. That's very different from you owe me access to your body so I can feel loved. Maturity allows you to deeply desire something without making another person's response responsible for your worth. So you are trying to expand your capacity for intimacy and not putting intimacy entirely on sexual intimacy. That's what I want you to practice. I'm not saying remove the 7th floor. I am saying expand your intimacy vocabulary. Okay? You have an impoverished intimacy. If that's the only intimacy you see when intimacy comes up, I'm wanting you to expand your intimacy vocabulary. Can you experience intimacy through conversation? Can you tolerate emotions that she has without fixing them? Can you remain present when she cries? Can you become curious about some things, that you don't personally find interesting because she is interesting to you? The person, the woman. Can you validate any experience even if you don't agree with it? Can you sit beside her disappointment without solving it? Can you hold her inside of her challenges without trying to fix it or trying to advise her? Can you cherish without receiving anything for it? Can you touch without escalating to sexual intimacy? Can you hear not tonight without collapsing into rejection and anger and sulking or withdrawal? Can you express sexual desire without demanding sex? Can you allow your wife to have a separate emotional experience from you? Can you be deeply connected with her without constantly needing connection to reassure you that you're okay? That's called capacity. And some men have tremendous sexual capacity, but very little intimacy capacity. That's what I want to see changed. So for me as a Christian, I think there's something underneath this entire ladder. Before I ask my wife, how do I say this? Before I ask my wife to convince me that I am wanted, before I ask her to prove that I'm enough, before I ask her sexually to convince me that I'm masculine, before I make her responsible for making me feel chosen, which she's not any of those things, I have to get involved in another kind of intimacy. And that is my intimacy with God. Okay? I need to learn how to be known by God, knowing. Okay? I want to be known by God. I want to be loved by God. I'm going to get my value from God. I'm going to get my worth from God. I'm going to get my security from God. I'm going to be chosen by God. Okay? I am also this is God as Father. So I'm increasing my sources. My wife is not the one who needs to use sexual intimacy to prove my value, my worth, that I'm loved, received, wanted, desired, masculine. My starting place is always God. I'm going to Him and I'm getting these things from Him. I'm receiving love from Him, receiving value, receiving worth, receiving security, receiving my place in Him. Okay? I need to know Him. And when I can tell Him this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm fearing. Then I can be quiet and I can open up my spiritual ears and my spiritual eyes, and I can receive from Him. So what that looks like is, for example, let's say I'm feeling alone right now. I can go to God, set my mind on Him, and speak to Him and say, Father, I'm feeling very alone right now. Talk to me about that. And I be quiet, and I open my spiritual ears and my spiritual eyes, and I listen. And I let Him speak to me. Now He knows me. I'm experiencing His love. I'm experiencing His value, His worth. I'm getting my security. All of this is happening inside my relationship with Him. The more I have this going on, the less pressure I'm going to have on my wife. See, because this is my wife over here. She is one of my relationships, but not my first one. This is number one, then my relationship with myself, then my relationship with my wife. If I'm getting this from God, that's less pressure I'm putting on my wife for my identity, my value, my worth, my security, being chosen, being secure, okay? And then once whatever God gives me, then I can give it to myself. I can stay present with myself. What am I feeling? What am I afraid of? What stories am I telling myself? Why did her no hurt so badly? And I'm actually am I actually sexually frustrated right now? Or did something inside me interpret this as nobody wants you? Those are different things. So if you don't know your internal world, you're going to unconsciously ask your wife to regulate something that you have not even identified. So when you come to your wife, you need to make sure that this relationship between you and the Father is flowing. This is called sonship. You're receiving from him. Then you're loving her. You can only love her as you love yourself. Whatever he gives you, let's say he validates you. In other words, it makes sense why you would feel that way. Okay, can you validate yourself? When you say, what am I feeling? I'm feeling lonely. What do I need? Validation. Okay, can I get that from God? Yes. Can I validate myself? Yes. I could see why I would be feeling this way. That's self-validation. So you're having intimacy with God, intimacy with self. You see why you need to change the definition of intimacy. Because intimacy is not just sexual intimacy. It's knowing, understanding, validation, empathy, cherishing, physical vulnerability. All of these can happen with God. Then you bring them to yourself. And when you become secure in who you are in God and you learn to honestly sit with yourself, something changes inside of you. And you can come toward your wife, not asking, what can you give me? But also loving her like Christ loved the church. How can I know you? How can I understand you? How can I validate you? How can I be empathetic toward you? How can I cherish and delight in you? How can I give you physical vulnerability that creates all of these different areas of intimacy? And when those areas of intimacy are built, that is going to lead to the sexual intimacy on the horizontal plane. So you have ultimate intimacy with God, intimacy with yourself, and now you have intimacy with your wife. And everything is not sitting just on your wife. A lot of us have never learned how to interact with God this way as Father. And we have not learned how to sit with ourselves and actually work through situations inside of ourselves. We just put it all on our wives. And then if we don't have this grid of intimacy, it's all on our wife, converging in sexual intimacy alone, which is really hardly intimacy at all. Okay? So I'm challenging you to an intimacy turnaround. For the next 30 days, I want you to stop measuring the health of your marriage primarily by how frequently you're having sex. I'm not telling you to ignore sexuality. Don't pretend you don't desire your wife. Just broaden the measurement, okay? Do I know her? Do I understand her? Does she feel validated by me? Can I empathize with her? Does she experience herself as cherished? Can we experience affectionate physical closeness without constant pressure? Can we talk honestly and freely about our sexual relationship? And don't do this for 30 days thinking, and at the end of this, she better want more sex. No, because then you're still standing on floor 7. You're just pretending to visit the other floors. Okay, that's pretense. Do it because this is the husband I want to become. This is how God loves his bride. You can't love your wife the way Christ loves the church unless you love like Christ. So this is Christ being formed in you. All right? I want greater capacity. I want to become emotionally stronger. I want to become more curious. I want to have the ministry of presence. I want to be more affectionate. I want to be more empathetic and more secure and more capable of giving and receiving love in all of its forms. And here's what I want you to remember. Sex isn't the enemy of intimacy. Sexuality is not the problem here. Wanting your wife is not the problem. The problem is when we've asked sexuality to become the entire definition of intimacy and then demand that it carry our acceptance and our masculinity and our worth and our connection and our security and our identity. That's way too much weight for sex, and it's too much weight for your wife. So maybe this turnaround begins with a real simple understanding that sex is not the front door of intimacy. It's the 7th floor of intimacy. It's one of the most vulnerable rooms in the house. And maybe instead of standing outside that room asking, why won't she let me in? Let me in. Why don't you start walking through the rest of the house with her again and know her and understand her and spend time with her and validate her and empathize with her and slow down for her and pause for her and empathize and cherish and hold her without any demand. And when sexual intimacy emerges from a relationship where two people increasingly feel known and safe and wanted and free, then you haven't diminished sex. You've just finally given it an intimate home to live inside of. That's the power of this. So that is the intimacy turnaround, and I'm challenging you to this. And one more thing before you go. If you've listened to everything I've taught today and you're thinking, you know what, Jason, that sounds great, but my wife is not going to fall for this. She avoids it. Well, if I start asking more questions and pursuing more connection and initiating more conversations and trying to get closer to her, she's probably going to move farther away. Well, I hear you. Believe me. I don't want you to miss the second video. It's called Intimacy Turnaround, the Avoidant Edition. And it's going to be right here on my channel on YouTube. Because an avoidant wife may not just be waiting for you to climb floors 1 through 6. She may have learned to protect herself from those floors as well. Like she doesn't have a grid for them. Okay? Being known for her can feel exposing. Understanding can feel like analysis. Cherishing her can actually be very difficult for her to receive. And physical affection may already have put years of expectation that make it difficult for her body to trust that touch is actually free. And that's why your approach matters tremendously. So in the Avoidant Edition, I'm going to show you how to invite without pursuing. I'm going to show you how to give space without withdrawing. I'm going to show you how to cherish her without demanding a response and offering affection without creating an obligation, communicating your own needs without abandoning yourself. Because loving an avoidant woman does not mean disappearing, and it doesn't mean trying harder to break through her defenses. It means you're learning how to become safe enough to approach her without pressure, secure enough to tolerate her autonomy, and strong enough to still require mutuality inside your marriage. So if that's your marriage, then watch the Intimacy Turnaround Avoidant Edition next, because this one here that you just watched is for the first foundation. It's the one for the foundation. The next one you're going to watch is for your application. So remember, same house, same 7 floors, but a very different way of approaching the door. I pray this was a blessing to you. Thank you for joining me today, and have a wonderful day.